You're listening to Romancing in Paris on Paris Underground Radio.
Hello, and welcome to the Romancing in Paris podcast. I'm your host, Lily Heise. In this podcast, we'll be traveling around the city as I pick out my top romantic spots per arrondissement. You don't have to visit these places only as a couple. Exploring them can be the expression of your own love of Paris. Are you ready to get romancing in Paris? Hello, and welcome back to this new episode of Romancing in Paris. Like the last two episodes on romantic springtime places in Paris and the oh-so-romantic castle near Paris, the Château de Malmaison, in today's episode, we're going to cover another theme. The topic is something which inspires all visitors to Paris, and something which can be evaluated as a group, which is why I thought it would be nice to cover them all together, even though some might be deserving of a single episode on their own. This type of site inspires travelers, and especially couples, in destinations around the world. But there's something extra special about the ones in Paris, and, in particular, the ones I've selected. Grab your sherry. We're going on a jaunt of the most romantic bridges in Paris. A walk along the Seine. It's truly one of the most magical things to do in Paris. I've already highlighted one of my favorite sections to walk on the left bank, the Quai de la Tournelle, in a previous episode. I really love certain sections of the right bank too. The shimmering waters of the Seine and the gorgeous monuments which line it are sublime. These can be admired from the city's 37 bridges, or ponts in French. Stopping to enjoy a moment atop the water on a bridge certainly adds to the allure of a romantic outing. Bridges in varying forms have been built across the River Seine for 2,000 years, although many of Paris's current-day bridges were constructed in the 1800s, often as part of Napoleon III and Prefect Baron Haussmann's grand designs of modern Paris. It hasn't always been smooth sailing for the city's bridges. Over the centuries, strong currents of the Seine have washed some of the bridges away. Others have had a range of accidents which have damaged them or have been replaced for other reasons. Paris's bridges help defend the city from invaders, and some used to require paying a toll in order to cross them. It's also quite hard to believe, but there used to be houses on the bridges in Paris, very similar to the ones that still stand on the Ponte Vecchio in Florence. In 1786, an order was issued to remove all houses from the bridges. However, it took a little while for them to disappear completely. If you're interested in seeing what Paris used to look like with the bridges, check out some of the paintings that are on display at the Musée Carnavalet, the City of Paris History Museum. I could go on for ages about the fascinating history of Parisian bridges, but instead, let's get down to visiting the ones which I think have the greatest romantic appeal, selected based on their design, history, and/or views. We'll be touring these from east to west, and if you're up for a big walk, you too could visit them in this order, or maybe split them into two parts. I've even added a handy Google map of them on my website to help you visit. Shall we get our journey started? The first bridge we're going to is Le Pont Louis-Philippe, located in the 4th arrondissement and connecting the Ile Saint-Louis to the right bank's Quai de l'Hôtel de Ville. As you might gather from its name, it was built in honor of Louis-Philippe, the last king of France. It was commissioned by the king on the 29th of July, 1833, on the 3rd anniversary of the outbreak of Les Trois Glorieuses, the 3 Glorious Days, also known as the July Revolution. This revolt led to Louis-Philippe's ascension to the throne. This bridge replaced a suspension bridge which previously extended here. The king himself came to lay the first stone of the bridge, and it was opened the next year. The bridge didn't have a toll, and thus it became quite popular. To allow for the increasing traffic, that bridge was torn down in 1860 and replaced by the one which stands on this spot today. It's a lovely arched bridge decorated with stone laurel wreaths, one of the favorite symbols of Napoleon III, which he also put on several other bridges of the era. The bridge has a gorgeous view from all vantage points. To the east, it looks out towards the simple yet pretty Pont Marie. To the west, you can start to see some of the monuments of Ile de la Cité, including Notre Dame, and to the north is the beautiful perspective towards Rue des Barres, which was covered in episode 4 of the podcast. But my favorite perspective of all is to the south, where you have a perfect view towards the Pantheon, peeking through the elegant buildings of Ile Saint-Louis and sitting on its perch on the Sainte Geneviève mountain. It's really divine, especially in the late afternoon or evening. If you've crossed over the Pont Louis-Philippe and onto Ile Saint-Louis, you'll be just around the corner from the Pont Saint-Louis. Although it's not such an attractive bridge in itself, this short bridge connecting Ile Saint-Louis and Ile de la Cité is romantic for a number of reasons. Built in 1970, it's the 7th incarnation of a bridge linking Paris's 2 inhabited islands. The first one was installed in 1634, but not at this location. Instead, it was further north and connected the Quai d'Orléans, or the Quai d'Orleans, to the Rue des Ursins. 7 bridges and 4 separate names. My favorite was Le Pont Rouge, or the Red Bridge, its name over much of the 1700s. The bridge's charm is twofold: its ambiance and its views. It often attracts musicians or some other form of performer, especially when the weather is nice or on weekends. The bridge also boasts some of the most quintessential cityscape views of any of the Paris bridges. In one direction, you have the quaint cafes which sit at the tip of Ile Saint-Louis. In the other, you have, in normal times, a beguiling view of the flying buttresses which hug the back of Notre Dame. And then there's also an exceptional perspective towards l'Hôtel de Ville, City Hall, and the late medieval tower, the Tour Saint-Jacques. Since it's closed to traffic, it's very peaceful, which makes it an ideal spot to linger and savor the moment with your chérie. If you carry on your meander, skirting behind Notre Dame, you'll reach the Pont de l'Archevêque. Regular listeners of the podcast might recall that I mentioned this bridge in episode number 5, which covered the Quai de la Tournelle, as that left bank riverside road and walkway passes by this bridge. the narrowest road bridge in Paris at 11 meters wide, the bridge was built in 1824 and connects the eastern tip of the Ile de la Cité to the 5th arrondissement. It's named after the archevêque, or the archbishop's residence, which used to exist between Notre Dame and the river and was destroyed in anti-clerical riots in 1831. The bridge has had as troubled a past as its namesake. In 1911, a city bus crashed off of it and into the Seine, and only back in 2008 it was the location of an accident between a bateau mouche which crashed into another leisure boat. Yikes! In more recent years, it had a different type of damage, that of the troublesome love locks, as this bridge was used as an alternative after glass panels were installed on the Pont des Arts. These also had to be added to this bridge in order to prevent the vandalism of the love locks. There's no need to commemorate your love with a lock. Instead, take a selfie with your sweetheart at this very romantic spot, as the western side of the bridge has one of the most beautiful vistas in Paris. The southern side and towers of Notre Dame, and the picturesque cobbled walkway down below, beyond which is the sparkling waters of the Seine. I think it's one of the most beautiful vantage points in all of Paris. While it's breathtaking day or night, I have a slight preference for sunset, which can be rather magical here. A little further to the west is our next bridge, which might be somewhat underrated, Le Pont Saint-Michel. This short bridge links the Place Saint-Michel on the left bank to the Ile de la Cité. When the first bridge was built here in 1378, it was nicknamed Le Pont Neuf, or the New Bridge, a name which a different bridge now bears. The bridge has since been rebuilt, and many times, way down by houses. As I mentioned earlier on, the bridge and its homes were carried away after being hit by large chunks of ice from a very bad freeze over the Seine. Luckily, the river doesn't freeze over anymore, and thus ice can be removed from the hazard list. This current bridge was built in 1857 and is emblazoned with the insignia of Napoleon III, that is, an N within a wreath of laurels. It has gorgeous views in both directions. Facing east is the lovely perspective of Notre Dame, and to the west there is an enchanting view towards Pont Neuf and the Louvre beyond. On the opposite side of Ile de la Cité is Le Pont au Change, a showstopper of sorts, linking Ile de la Cité to Place du Châtelet. A first bridge was built at this location all the way back in the 9th century, and this was called Le Grand Pont, or the Large Bridge. Its name was gradually changed to the Change Bridge, thanks to the goldsmiths and money changers who once had shops in the buildings which lined the bridge as early as the 12th century. The current bridge is another one dating from the Napoleon III era. Completed in 1860, it also bears his imperial insignia on the sides. Its westerly views are exquisite at 2 levels. First, in the very middle of the bridge, you have a dreamy view of the Conciergerie, Pont Neuf, and the Louvre in the distance. And then, if you keep going until the northern edge of the bridge, the Eiffel Tower peeks up over the dome of the Institut de France. This is one of my absolute favorite views in the whole city. But if you're hoping for a good photo here, aim to come in the morning or early afternoon. Later than that, the horizon is usually too backlit. If you're enjoying this episode of Romancing in Paris, you may also like to tune in to our sister podcast, Paris Undressed, which explores the fascinating world of French lingerie. Romancing in Paris will be right back after a word from our sponsors.
And now back to Romancing in Paris.
I have alluded to the next bridge a few times already, and that is Le Pont Neuf. As many people know, what is now called the New Bridge is actually Paris's oldest existing bridge. Extending from right to left bank at the tip of Ile de la Cité, the bridge begun in 1578. However, construction was halted from 1588 to 99 due to the turmoil of the Wars of Religion. The bridge was opened to traffic in 1604, completed in 1606, but only inaugurated by Henry IV in 1607. So, you may see a few dates cited as the bridge's birthday. Its posterity isn't the only factor that makes the bridge exceptional. The first bridge in Paris built without houses. Its wide open berth and curved alcoves with built-in stone benches made it the perfect gathering place for Parisians. It was the in place to be in Paris, and attracted all walks of life, in addition to vendors, performers, and hustlers. Its heyday lasted from its creation until the 1750s, when the bridge's popularity began to wane in lieu of Les Grands Boulevards. It's hard to imagine this today, with the bridge's rather serene ambiance. From the northwestern side, you have some lovely vistas of the river, which can be admired sitting on one of those alcoves I mentioned, arm in arm with your chérie. On the middle of the bridge is a replica of a statue of Henry IV, commissioned after his death in 1614 by his widow, Marie de Medici. A nice gesture, considering her husband was quite the romantic, but not only with her. But maybe that's the subject for another episode. If you walk as far as the statue, you can also take the stairs down to the small park which sits at the tip of the island, the Square du Vert Galant, which bears the nickname of the king, the Green Gallant. See, I told you he was a romantic. From upon the bridge, one can't really see one of the most unique features of it. Its 381 mascarons, stone masks representing the heads of mythological forest and field divinities, which decorate the sides of the bridge. The ones you see today were actually put on in the mid-1980s. However, a few of the originals are on display at the Musée Carnavalet, another reason to visit this great museum. From the Pont Neuf, you can see our next bridge, the Pont des Arts. Sometimes deemed the Lovers' Bridge of Paris, due to the former unfortunate Lovelocks craze, there's much more to love about this charming footbridge. Spanning the Seine between the dome of the Institut de France and the Louis XIV commission section of the Louvre, it was originally built in the early 1800s and was the first metal bridge in Paris. In the early 1980s, it was rebuilt, thankfully identically to the original. The bridge features jaw-dropping views of the Ile de la Cité and the Pont Neuf to the east, and the Musée d'Orsay and the Grand Palais to the west. And if you stand in the right place, closer to the Louvre, You also have a decent view of the Eiffel Tower. In addition to its panorama, the trafficless bridge has a peaceful ambiance, as well as nice benches where you can have a cuddle with your sweetheart while gazing out at the perspective. Although it's stunning both day and night, I have to admit I have a small preference for the evening, when I also recommend, either before or after, taking a little stroll through the courtyards of the Louvre, which are simply enchanting at night. We're now going to jump ahead a few bridges in order to reach the city's ultimate romantic bridge, the glitzy Pont Alexandre III, or the Alexander III Bridge. The bridge is one of the most romantic places in all of Paris, thanks to its lavish decoration and its prominent location on a curve in the Seine, which grants it some sensational views over the city and the river. Built in 1900 to connect the two sections of that year's World's Fair, the fairgrounds around the Petit Palais to those in front of Les Invalides, it was named in honor of the Russian Tsar to commemorate the Franco-Russian alliance signed in 1892. The elaborate bridge is flanked on either end by 4 huge sockles holding the statues of Farnese, the Roman goddess of starvation, who is restraining Pegasus. It is also dotted with playful water nymphs, groupings of cat scales, frolicking fish, and other aquatic symbolism. During the day, you might not be the only couples who've come to immortalize their love on the bridge, but it's less visited and much prettier at night when its unique Belle Epoque lamps are ablaze and the dome of Les Invalides and the Eiffel Tower are shining in the background. Oh la la, it's beyond magical. The Pont Alexander III can pride itself on nice views of La Dame de Fer, or the Iron Lady. However, these are outshone by the ones available from the Passerelle de Billy. Extending from Avenue New York to the Quai Branly, this footbridge was also built to connect the fairgrounds of the 1900 World's Fair. Much simpler than its showier big brother, Alex. Despite having the same designer, engineer Jean Ressal, here it's the views which outweigh structural good looks. A stone's throw away from the Eiffel Tower, the Dubilly Bridge is handy for photos or merely for a quiet moment away from the masses found at the world's most famous tower. The last bridge on our list is found on the other side of the Eiffel Tower, the Pont Bir Hakeim. Here once again we have a bridge which is appealing both in itself and for its vistas. One of the most attractive bridges in the city, it connects the 16th district at Passy to the 15th arrondissement. I touched on this bridge in episode 15 as it crosses the topic we covered in that episode, the Île aux Cygnes, or Swan Island. Previously called the Viaduc de Passy, it was built from 1903 to 1905 and replaced a bridge first constructed here in 1878. A double-decker bridge, it carries trains of Line 6 above the pedestrian and car level. In recent years, the alluring Art Nouveau-esque bridge has become something of an Instagram darling, and with good reason. There's much to love about this bridge. The perspective from under the arches, The vista granted of the Eiffel Tower and the city from the little landing at the tip of the island. But my favorite way to visit the bridge isn't on foot, but instead aboard Metro Line 6. As the train shoots out of the station at either Passy or Bir Hakeim, passengers are treated to a sensational view of the Eiffel Tower and the river. Really, it is an unrivaled thrill and unforgettable. I hope you too will have plenty of unforgettable moments visiting these wonderful romantic bridges in Paris. Thank you for listening to this latest edition of Romancing in Paris. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. That way you won't miss the next one. Ratings or reviews get a big je t'aime from me. If you would like to discover more romantic places in Paris, see my website jetaimeneither.com. Until next time, happy romancing in Paris.
This episode of Romancing in Paris was produced by Jennifer Garrity for Paris Underground Radio. For more on this show and shows like it, please visit parisundergroundradio.com.